Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Heart to Heart. This is an IGTV and now newly branded YouTube series started by myself, Dr. Bin Mohammed, and my partner in crime, Dr. Misha Gupta, where we talk to today's physicians about their journeys through medicine, their social media presence, and really just learning about them as people. So today we are so incredibly fortunate to have Dr. Coleman and Dr. Saggar, both practicing within the same practice in New Jersey. Dr. Coleman is an internist and nephrologist, and Dr. Saggar is an infectious disease specialist, very relevant in these times. They have both been involved in interviewing with various media outlets, and also they started a not so typical podcast called Recommended Daily Dose, where they talk to different people in the healthcare field regarding various topics in medicine while adding just a little bit of humor. So we are so incredibly fortunate to have you guys. Thank you guys for joining us. I know both of you guys are very, very busy, especially during these times. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
Of course. So the first question we really like to ask our guests is to share a little bit about their journeys through medicine and how they ultimately chose their specialty. So whoever wants to get started first, go at it.
Age before beauty. Go ahead.
No, mine's easy. I'm Indian, so I had three choices. I could be an engineer, I could be a pharmacist, or I could be a doctor. You know, that's kind of a joke, kind of not really, right? But I think 3 out of 4 of us know what I'm talking about. My journey is an extension of my father, who just recently retired after 39 years prior practice. I have a lot of family members both in the States and in India that are involved in medicine. Even going back to my grandfather's time in Punjab, he was a pharmacist and owned a pharmaceutical company. So I think it was always in my blood. And, you know, I was a typical story growing up. My dad would pick me up. He would take me on rounds, you know, after soccer, after tennis. So you kind of like an early age, just really become inundated and just exposed to the hospital and prior practice world. And so really for me, there really wasn't much choice, but that's okay. That's actually what I always wanted to do.
And what about going into infectious disease?
Oh yeah, so you know, that is actually not typical. I actually wanted to be a cardiologist initially going into it. So yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's right. But after my first year of med school, I spent the entire summer in South India, and I was with an infectious disease guy down there. And I saw how they were treating things like HIV, hepatitis, malaria, typhoid, and it really just got me interested academically in infectious disease. And so I thought, well, I did an MPH, let me just do infectious disease fellowship, and I'll, you know, end up working for the WHO, the CDC. But instead, I went to prior practice route, which is different, has its own advantages and disadvantages. But I never regret one moment of it. You know, it's been incredibly academically stimulating. And needless to say, I've had my, you know, people before me, you know, went through the HIV epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it. Now, of course, of COVID-19. So this has been a career-changing experience for me. Hopefully, just a one and done type of thing. But I had no regrets going into it.
Awesome. And how about you, Clinton?
So similar to Saggar, I had 3 choices. It was go to medical school, play basketball, or rap. So I wasn't good at the latter. So I decided to go to medical school. But I think typically for me, and less typical for Saggar, my family wasn't in the medical field. So it was I was the first, hopefully not the last, to go to medical school. My mom subsequently went to nursing school, is now a nurse practitioner, but you know, that medicine was not in our family. So I was always interested in science and biology. So I wanted to do research. But at some point I got steered towards doing medicine. And I like people, I like the biology. And that probably led me to nephrology, is the physiology, just the fact you're being very cerebral with nephrology as opposed to something like infectious disease.
You even have to see
patients. Bang. Anyway,
look at numbers all day.
Well, and now both of your journeys have led you to each other, right? So
it's so romantic.
It has been exceedingly fantastic to meet Coleman, and it's really a dream come true. Yeah.
I could sense that.
You like to joke around a lot, but I will tell you, we have a lot of similarities in terms of our views on medicine, our views on public policy, our views as racism, a public health issue. We both end up getting splashed on TV and do a lot of medical reporting, and we just have a lot of interest. So, and Coleman will tell you, the podcast idea was all his. So I'm more the looks, he's more the brains of the, yeah. But when he approached me, because it was all his idea, I give him full credit. It was really an incredible outlet, creative, a creative outlet for us. And since we kind of already have very similar beliefs, obviously we come from very different backgrounds, and that's fine. But I think a lot of the policy and how we view medicine and how we view humanity are very similar. And so it kind of makes for a really easy kind of way to go back and forth. So, it's like the odd couple, but it's like the black and brown version. So, yeah.
Right.
Well, you kind of went into my second question here, but I do think it's interesting and enjoyable, right? When we have colleagues that come from different backgrounds who have different journeys from us, and then we assimilate together from our differences and our similarities. And you guys have this amazing podcast that you started. You touched a little bit about how it was Clinton's brilliant idea, but can you tell us a little bit more about, what specifically you wanted to do with your podcast and where you see it going and what your goals are for it?
It was really to make a lot of money.
No, it wasn't. Well, he probably still thinks that. No, but I think, both of us, I'm sure all of us actually want to help people, and we do it on a day-to-day basis with our patients, but we really want to do it at scale, as far as touching a large audience. And we both had been involved with media as I guess medical correspondents on local New York news. So we got a taste of it. Once we got a taste of it, it was like, wow, we can. And that taste was other people's message. So the producer would give us a topic that we probably wouldn't want to talk about, but we would talk about it on a large scale to millions of listeners. And I was thinking, why can't we just do that ourselves and talk about what we want to talk about to touch the lives that we want to talk about? And I think podcast was probably the most natural progression of that. As far as structure, limited finances, limited time. So I think that was our my initial focus was to try to just broaden our reach to people and build an audience.
Yeah.
And, do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm just going to expand upon that. I was joking about the money. It really comes down to creative outlet and a way of disseminating information. We all talk to our patients every day, but you're kind of limited, right? The X amount of patients that you see. And then we continue to do a lot of media, but that's very kind of like heavily, looked on, and you can say certain things, you can't say certain things.
Right.
So obviously when I do weekly on Fox News, and you're very strict what you can say and you can't say.
Right.
And so Clinton said, hey, and it's not really because we want to be famous and be on a podcast. It was really like we realized we enjoyed disseminating information. Like you feel good about it. It's almost like a public health versus population health. Well, this is our way of doing public health, is by educating. And we both see residents, we see medical students, at the two hospitals that we consult at. But this is a way of getting general information out to a large audience. And we really enjoyed that. And so we said, Clinton said, why can't we do this on our own? Have a little flavor, humor, what have you, but kind of keep it. I think a general shtick you can say is really having two unique perspectives, having a perspective from an African American, from an Indian American, and then seeing how that's relevant for us all. And it's been incredibly satisfying, to really, and like I said, it's really kept us sane during this pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were also, if I can add to that, we were also frustrated with the medical information out in the media, right? It's either online with, what's the equivalent for up to date for people? What do people search? Google or
Google.
Wikipedia, yeah. Or you're watching TV with Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, and it's really dry, boring. It's a real niche audience. It's the stay-at-home moms. When we wanted to talk to people that we actually normally talk to and relate to them. So that's, I guess, what's a millennial? I guess Suraj's too old for a millennial, but like people 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
This interview right now, I'm gonna tell you that.
And then the trick is people.
I think I'm Gen X. That I am, yeah.
Gen X.
Gen X. That sounds good. Yeah, but the whole idea is that
you're a carpetbagger.
Flavor.
No, but people want to be entertained, not just educated too. So I think there's a market for that, which really I don't think it's been tapped into much without, dancing on TikTok or all that stuff. I think we could just provide some, entertaining and engaging information to try to not entertain and educate the
Yeah,
people
but
at the
still
same time.
maintain who we are, right? I mean, the idea was like, Clinton was like, should we do TikTok videos? He didn't say that, but I was just joking. I was like, no, we can't do that, man. We're a certain age, but we can still joke around. We can talk a lot of things about public, events and current events and things like that. So the idea was to still maintain the fact that we're physicians and that we, we're not gonna sit there and juggle balls up, for people, but at the same time, we can still be funny in the right way, still be entertaining. And that's what we kind of hope, is kind of our angle when we present medical information.
And we haven't ruled out TikTok yet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you guys would be good on TikTok. I do a little bit of TikTok. I'm not that big, but yeah.
I'm not so sure. I
would love to see the both of you guys on TikTok.
You touched on it. It's about connecting, right? It's about connecting with an audience, and the way that you two do it is obviously with this back and forth between yourselves, but also that's something that's just very relatable, and people want to be relatable. And I think, that goes into like the doctor-patient relationship. It goes into the medical public relationship. And so, it's just bringing another angle to that in a media form that people can tap into.
Yeah, because you want people to be comfortable talking to physicians. And typically it was an older male, perhaps white physician, right? Doctor knows best, father knows best, that whole angle. And, we're kind of talking down to patients. So it's the whole idea of talking to patients, being relatable. So we come from different backgrounds. We live outside New York City, but I actually grew up in a small town. So I feel like you can appeal to a small town audience, a big town audience, and everything in between. And that really makes you or any of us all better physicians, right? To have varied backgrounds. It's better for the medical community in the United States to have physicians of all different backgrounds. So that's really kind of like what we like to talk about. Like I said, but it's like a fine line between maintaining our medical integrity. That's the word I was looking for. At the same time, being funny, because, no one, and not being too dry. I mean, if you listen to doctors' radio sometimes, I'm falling asleep while I'm driving, it's just too boring. But then at the same time, you have some other doctors or perhaps that are just making jokes all day long, right? Or you have people like Dr. Phil, who I won't even comment on. So you want to find your own niche and just kind of go with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that one of the best things about you guys is really your chemistry, with one another. And the fact that, like, I remember going on your podcast, and instantly the minute I started talking to you guys, I just felt so comfortable. And I think that is really, that's really important, to have a really good, healthy, genuine, conversation, because
I was going to say, I think Clinton will agree. I mean, that comes naturally, right? You guys are very engaging and very friendly and outgoing, so it makes it very easy. But I know one place we learned, because is when we started doing the news, because when we first showed up, I mean, I almost like passed out, right? So we were like, live in front of 7 million people. Don't worry about it. But the anchors were like just making jokes before we went on, and like 30 seconds to air TV, they're joking, and then you hear someone say 10 seconds to air. I mean, now it's become second nature when we do it, but in the beginning, it was very nerve-wracking. And I would say that what I learned was that, wow, just making jokes and making it light, it makes it much more enjoyable for everyone out there, the audience, as well as your guests.
Right.
And so on a much smaller scale, obviously, I think we try to do that. So whenever we talk to anyone, we'll make a joke or two or three, usually at Coleman's expense, but it's fine. The whole, he takes it like a champ. And the whole idea is just to get it out there. No, we're not some stuffy doctors, it's fine. It's funny. And I think it makes for a better show. So, but I would say we definitely took that from what we learned from media and kind of applied it into our own platform.
Right. So I'm gonna, you guys are literally going through our questions. So it's, it's funny. No, but this is a really good transition.
It's okay. We're experts. It's okay.
Yeah, they're pros. We don't even have to ask you guys questions. You can just talk.
I'm in the conversation. But so I was going to touch on, media and, your presence in social media, but I think I'm more so, because you've already talked about this a little bit, but maybe how you were able to get started within the media, because it sounds like that was your first, like you said, that you have been interviewed by various media channels, and this is kind of how the idea of the podcast came up. So how were you initially able to get started started? Did you even have a goal to get started on media? Was that something that you aspired to do? And for those people, because we have a very young audience, right? We have a lot of students and trainees that follow us. And so for those people that have similar aspirations to, you know, be like you guys one day, because you guys are such fantastic role models, what
oh my God.
what kind of advice, what kind of advice would you give to, you know, students, trainees, even early career physicians like ourselves, you know, that want to get involved in media and use that to elevate their own careers?
I would say I'll start first.
Yeah, I'll let you answer it, because I followed his lead. You were doing it maybe 6 months or a year before I was doing it.
I would say it really became a little bit of luck. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who want to do media. Did I have any aspirations? Absolutely not. You know, it wasn't even crossed my radar. But I went on TV with a very famous reporter in New York City to do something about sepsis. It was National Sepsis Month. I think every September is Sepsis Awareness Month or whatever. And then I went on, it was live, but I knew what I was going to talk about, a month ahead of time. So I could prepare myself. And it's just basically talking to someone, and the cameras are over here, and they're just recording us talking and happen to be live on air. So no problem. And then I did it again for like influenza and vaccinations, whatever. And so how did I even get that? And how did we get that? The hospital that we are affiliated with, we're both the chief of each other's respective departments, has a very excellent public relations and media department. So they have a lot of connections. And so the media head actually used to be the head of Fox News, National Fox News. And so she had a lot of contacts. And so she said, let's get you guys to do something about infectious disease. And then one day they said, well, can you be on the news desk? And I was like, what are you talking about? I can't be on the news desk. I was like, no, absolutely not. I have no media or journalism background. But they said, look, just try it once. And I was like, fine, I'll try it once. I'll fail epically. I'll make my mom proud. She'll send it to her book club friends, and all the aunties, right? They'll laugh about it, and that's no big deal. But I guess I did it a bunch of times, and I didn't mess up, and they actually liked me. And then they said, well, we want you to do it more, but I can only do so much. I'm in private practice. And they said, well, they were probably looking for obviously a diverse demographic.
Better looking person. So they reached out to me.
No, but Clinton. So we had another cardiologist friend of ours who did it as well. And then Clinton. And then we would basically take turns, once a week, going into Manhattan and sitting at the news desk and doing the news. And then COVID hit, obviously. And so now I do it from home. So it's actually much easier. I'm usually wearing shorts. My dog's under the table, but I'm wearing a suit up top. And it's become second nature. So if for any of your, because I know, you have for your audience or for your listeners, probably a lot of people are interested. I think you have to just look for the break, and how to get in. But in the meantime, take any public speaking experience you can. So,
right.
I speak for several drug companies on the Speakers Bureau. I did a bunch of grand rounds. And I will tell you, I'm nothing special. I was actually that kid in elementary school who stuttered, who had to go in the short school bus for speech therapy. So I was by no means a natural. I had big glasses.
I'm taking notes.
Cheeks out the ear. I was so fat, and I was a mess. But my point is, if I can do it, anyone can. I can assure you, because I used to stutter. I was not a good public speaker. But over time, I would say, if you have residents and interns listening, it even comes down to doing morning report, and being able to stand in front of 20 people or 30 people after being on call. Yes, it's a pain in the butt, but you get better at speaking, and then you go from that to your first attending job, and then you volunteer because you want to be busy and let people know who you are. So you volunteer to do grand rounds, and next thing you know, there's 50 people and 75 people. And before COVID hit, I did a grand rounds. There was like 800 people there. But again, nothing special. It's just the evolution of public speaking. And then take advantage, if you're in the hospital, your private practice, whatever it might be, of any media, because media is always looking for people. There's always people who want to do TV. Yeah. So they pay you anything, but they'll be happy for you to come on. And if you're presentable and relatable and, don't make a fool of yourself, then you never know where things might go. And that's kind of everything in a nutshell. Yeah.
So Clinton,
I
was go ahead.
I was going to say it's not for everybody. I did it just to kind of test myself, because I like Serge didn't like stand up speaking or talking to people. And I was like, what's the most painful thing I could do was speak in front of 9 million people, on live TV. So I was like, let's try it. And then you get addicted to it. And it's on the glory and the fame. And you're like, I could do this. And But I just want to encourage people that you have to learn the craft. It's not like learning medicine and just regurgitating it. It's being able to speak clearly on on cue, at a level that people can understand. So we learned that on the job. So it wasn't regurgitating data. People don't want to hear that. They want to see someone who's relatable and able to give information. So there's always opportunities out there because there's only a select few people who can actually be bright, personable, and speak clearly, and who want to do it. So, and the thing is, it's there's few people who actually get paid for it. So we're of those who don't get paid for it. So I was just doing it just to practice the craft and learn the craft, and at some point, hopefully, would be able to make part of it a career out of it. But just know that it's something that you do to just build your skill, and not to expect that you're gonna, be on the news every night or have a steady job with it. So just some reality needs to be.
You have to put a lot of legwork in before it goes anywhere, if it goes anywhere. So exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to improvise, like Clinton said. I mean, it's not like you're giving a talk and you want to say A, B, and C. Sometimes the anchors will just like skip over A, go to C, and then go back to B. So you have to be on the fly, on live TV, jump around. And, it's not like talking to grand rounds, like you said. I mean, you have to kind of take complex issues, dumb them down, for lack of a better word, but still make them sound, and still be educating the general public. But you have to realize who you're listening to. And, in the beginning, I used to say, well, the New England Journal of Medicine. I realized no one wants to hear that. Or I said, so then I really had to kind of just, and like Clinton said, we kind of learned it on as we went along. But it's a pretty cool journey. It's a unique thing that we do. Although I'll tell you, like, my kid used to be really excited. Now he's like, oh, Dad's on TV. He couldn't care less.
Yeah, they don't care anymore.
Could not care. Like, he used to like DVR at my wife, and now it's like, I mean, he's like, Dad, I want to watch something else. Like, why?
Well, you know what though? That's amazing, because I think that, I mean, even though he's a kid and you're just now Dad's on TV, whatever, I think it's nice to see that that's the norm now, to have representation on TV, representation on different platforms. And he's growing up in a world that's different than the ones that we grew up in, right? So now it's normal for him to see that on TV where it wasn't before. And, that gets into my next question. You both are chiefs in your respective fields. You both have platforms on, big national television broadcasting shows and on your own podcasts. So obviously a big thing is diversity in medicine, diversity in public health, representation on all fronts, whether it be women, whether it be people from different backgrounds, of different religions, different ethnic groups, different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so, what are your feelings or perspectives, being, kind of leaders in your field, about how we can further diversify medicine in general and kind of open up more opportunities to those, coming up behind us?
Yeah, so that actually goes back to our previous talk. I think part of it was a selfish desire to be on the media, but also it's like an altruistic thing to actually show what a physician of color looks like, who can speak eloquently and relay information. So the little kids who see that, whether they're in grade school, middle school, going to medical school, they, I can be like that guy. And me knowing all my flaws and stuff, like, if I can do it, you can do it too. So I think that's the one thing that we have control over, is just being mentors and leaders to people who will follow after us. And I think us knowing that there's a lack of diversity and pushing towards a diverse healthcare field, healthcare providers, I think is important. But starting off as just being out there and being visible and letting people know that, this is something that you can aspire to, even if you look like me.
Right. And I mean, you're also on, a media platform which traditionally might not be felt to be as liberal as other media platforms,
right,
in terms of Fox News and CNN and BBC and everything that's out there. So I do think that that's making strides to, open up different views for different people.
Right. Just think of how many little girls of color, whether they're Indian or African American, want to be vice president or want to get into politics now, just because they saw, that's it's such an amazing thing. If we do it so much at scale, we can just change the world. You take for granted how effective you can be by people just looking at you. And that's the reason why I wear my white coat everywhere I go. Like I'll be at the supermarket wearing my white coat, so maybe I get discounts. But then so little kids can see,
that's really
cool,
not.
there's a doctor. And he never wears his white coat, but so the little Indian boys can't tell what he does.
Well, you know what? So it is different, and I'll just preface that it's interesting because if you're coming from a Southeast Asian background, we're probably not a minority in medicine. In fact, we're the biggest minority in medicine.
Yeah.
But from like my parents' generation, they were happy to be here. They got residencies. They were working, but were they leaders? Probably not. So I think it's just our responsibility to take what we were given. A good, solid upper middle class lifestyle and education, but take it to the next level. And so, my dad will tell me, well, I was working, but there wasn't really any minority physicians that were in medical exec, committees and things like that. So, now we're both chief of department. I mean, we're both on the med exec committee. And I think that's important because you're just taking it to the next level. And, I'll have to talk to my father and he'll say, well, we were working very hard, but we always felt. And again, I can't say this across the board, but he will say, well, yes, there are a lot of Indian doctors out there, but in the 80s and 90s, it kind of felt like always we were the FMGs or IMGs, foreign medical grads, and they maybe always offered chief of departments or like leadership positions, and certainly not in media. So I think if our responsibility as first generation born here is to take that and continue, and so I think it's just a kind of natural evolution of that. But either way you look at it, as Clinton said, I mean, someone that's a minority doesn't have to just look at someone who's African or Asian or Latinx or whatever. They just look at anyone and say, well, there's a whole rainbow of people in medicine, and then I think it will be encouraging and good for medicine. And we know in the end of the day that a more diverse workforce in medicine is really more effective. We talk about all the time, how racism is a public health policy, and Clinton does a lot of outreach in the African American community, and we've talked about how the distrust, especially in the African American community, maybe the Latinx community, of medicine, vaccines, things like that. He's done a lot of great work, in vaccine outreach. And so, I know this is a very broad topic. We could talk all day about this, but it comes back to the idea of why it's important to be in media and to be on different public platforms.
And we want to give a good representation of people we represent, right? Like, when you turn on TV, when you see people look like me that aren't always doctors, that, they're playing bad, whatever the stereotype is. So we want to just, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, address those things. And, we do a good thing. I'm curious to probably know, we're probably the first leaders in our respective departments of color at our institution, which is crazy in the year 2021, right? So
especially in right outside Manhattan, we're not in the middle of the middle of America. We're not in flyover country. Right? Just joking. For anyone that's in the middle of the country, I'm joking. But the idea is that you're absolutely right. I think tradition norms were there for a very long time, and it's nice to finally be breaking down a lot of these traditional norms that were really no one would have ever thought about that, just 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
And that's the thing. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have, I don't want to name any specific names, but I don't know if you guys have been following some other areas of the country and how a specific
Louisiana?
Okay, fine. We'll talk about it.
Tulane.
Absolutely ridiculous, right? Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. And, we're saying that you guys are, breaking barriers. You're both chiefs of your respective departments, African American, South Asian. It's amazing, in New Jersey, which, is luckily a little bit more progressive. But then now on the same note, in 2021, in Louisiana, we have a woman who was fired, a first African-American woman to be program director in that institution, and she was fired. And why? Because of racism. And I remember when I read through the entire court documents, I was infuriated. How is this happening now? I'm kind of curious to what your guys' thoughts are, because it's just it's appalling. I mean, when does it stop? You know, I feel like every instance that we have, right, we make some steps forward. People start understanding, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But don't you guys think that this is just happening over and over and over again? Like, when does it stop?
You know, I don't think it's new, and unfortunately, it's not like, I'm not surprised, and that's a sad feeling I have, that it should be surprising, it should be shocking, but you know, social media has given light to a lot of these things. This stuff has been happening for a long time.
Right.
Just the fact that the guy said, you know, we don't want you leading our med peds department because we don't want to distract you know, white candidates, it's crazy. But I think the thing has changed. What has changed is that we're holding everybody accountable for their behavior.
Absolutely, right.
That didn't happen before. So,
Right.
you know, I've been following the backlash, and it's like, it's well deserved. And, you know, I hope no one goes through their program. No one, you know, I think what's different now is that you know what you're getting, more or less, right? Before it was all hidden and under the table. Now it's like, you know, this stuff is, especially with equity, with women's rights, and, you know, men's people of color. I think, you know, the gloves are off. So if you're able to do this, then you have to deal with the repercussions.
Yeah, like Clinton said, it was always present. That's the power of social media, of course, is that, you know, this information can be disseminated very quickly to everyone out there, so people understand. You know, so when Clinton tells you, he'll tell you, man, you know, I'm not surprised. That's sad, you know, and so you might have a white colleague, friend say, man, I can't believe this is happening, and, you know, then he'll say, no, actually, this is happening, you know, and this continues to happen, and you realize that a lot of times it's not their fault. That, you know, they're not subconsciously trying to be racist. They just don't know, you know. So then that's why this is good for everyone. It's not just good for one portion of the United States. It's good for everyone to understand and to be on a level playing field, you know. So it becomes empowering, you know, as this information becomes disseminated. But I will tell you, you know, so on good news front, and this is us to be converse to what's happening in Louisiana. You know, I learned recently that Rutgers University, a very big university in New Jersey, was built by slaves, and they just had now finally their first African-American university president. So he was actually, and I heard him speak recently. So that's incredibly telling. And so I actually used that opportunity on MLK Day to talk to my son about, you know, racism and things in the African-American experience. So I think it's very empowering, and I think so. There's still hopes. I always say, yes, we have a long way to go, but there are a lot of positive things happening. We just have to continue to be part of that positive change.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like you said, with social media and with media in general, at least we're in a time now where this awareness brings on the actionable items and the accountability. We're no longer, you know, like you said, Clinton, it's been happening, whether it was racism, whether it was misogyny, whether it was discrimination, whether it was, you know, whatever topic, it was happening, but maybe people weren't aware of it. Maybe they looked the other way. But now there's nowhere else to look, right? It's staring right in front of us, and we have to, you know, move forward and actually make the change, right? And especially, you know, within the field of medicine, where there's so many of us that, you know, have leadership positions or have at least influence at different levels. And we've talked about this before. I think that you don't have to be, you know, chief of the department or, you know, a leader nationally to make a difference, right? So if you know these issues are present, if you can see them, that what they're happening, you can make a difference at whatever scale you can, wherever you are.
Yeah, I always like to think globally, act locally, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
I think
anyone can act.
I think we're like in the midst of like the evolution of humans, as for social evolution of humans. So if you you put out a timeline, you see when people were, you know, walking on their knuckles, and then they're walking and, you know, building tools. We're probably there socially. I think social media and just internet has like rapidly, you know, improved that dramatically. So I think when we look back in time, we'll probably look at this period of time where things hopefully change for the better, right? Where it's not acceptable to, you know, talk to a woman a certain way. You know, it's not shocking that, you know, an Indian or an African-American is the chief of their department, right? Or when you walk into the room and you see a doctor that looks different, It's not a surprise. So I think, it's hard for us because we're actually in it to realize it. But, I'm hopeful that once we look back, or at least our kids look back, we'll see that these things, even though they are kind of, normal, so to speak, were like apparent at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on that note, I think that we can leave this podcast today with that sense of hope, right? That, we're all in this and we're all working towards a better future for those behind us. So Clenton and Suraj, is there anything else that you'd like to leave our audience with before we go today?
I just want to say thank you so much for having us. I have been a little concerned, continue to be concerned by Clinton's poor posture. So I want to apologize for that because he's leaning back in that chair. I always tell you.
Well, let's talk. Wait. Let's talk about your stethoscope. What do you use a stethoscope for?
What do you use?
Be careful! You have two cardiologists in the room.
Oh, they need stethoscopes.
I did left and right heart sounds on everyone today.
Looking for endocarditis. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I did maneuvers, left-handed maneuvers, right-hand maneuvers. No, but I want to say that it's really empowering to see both of you, such bright physicians who I guess we're older, but really just really trying to change medicine and not being content with just being a doctor. And so I'll leave this with one statement is that, I think people of my father's generations, I would hear it from other uncles and, whether related or whatever, say, well, because Clinton was mentioning how things are evolving, so in the 80s and 90s, I used to hear stories of people saying, well, we would be at someone's house or something, they would say, well, overheard a nurse whisper and say, don't use this physician. That's the Indian physician, use a blank physician. And that wasn't that long ago. And then I think at that time, they really didn't know how to deal with that. They would kind of grumble at a party, or at a get-together, family get-together, but they wouldn't really have any way of, and that's unbelievable to me, right? So I think, like Clinton said, we're rapidly evolving where now we're empowered and that those things would never be acceptable, but it was not long ago that things like that were. And so I think the work that you guys are doing are incredibly important. And I want to thank you very much for having us.
Oh, well said. Brown nosing. Play
great.
on words too. That's a triple entendre. I would just encourage people to be true to themselves, right? And I think that's what makes all four of us relatable is that we are who we are and we don't change. And, we laugh, we joke, but we're relatable. And I think people want to see physicians who are relatable. And that goes back into even getting into medical school, right? So, I wasn't the A+ student, but, I did other things. I had activities, other hobbies. And I felt I was very relatable. And I think that's carried on into my practice. and I think that leads to success. Just being who you are.
And water polo,
Yeah.
water.
They don't know what jazzercise is. That's
Jazzercise,
the 80s, man.
Exactly.
Fingers.
Jazz hands.
Did you put that in your medical school application that you do jazzercise?
Jazzercise enthusiast.
Know about jazzercise.
I tell you, that's something.
No, but honestly, I think the future is bright, especially since we have, leaders and chiefs in departments that are like you, supporting women, supporting the young generation, supporting public health. So again, thank you both for being on our podcast and our series today. And to our audience, thanks for watching another episode of Heart to Heart. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.